Hello everyone, welcome to another event organized by JUG Istanbul. I'm Merve Gündoğmuş. I'm software engineer and member of JUG Istanbul. Today we have Otavio Piske with us. He will be presenting on the topic of Camel 4, what to expect. Before we begin, I would like to introduce our community. Okay, I turn off my camera. I'm sharing the slide. Can anyone see my screen?
Yes, Merve.
Thank you. Great. You can go.
No problem, right? So I'm starting to introduce. Java User Group Istanbul is one of the most active Java communities in Turkey. By organizing webinars, meetups, hackathons, bootcamps, and participating in the Global Day of Code Retreat, we contribute to the Java community. We host the annual international event, Java Day Istanbul, every year. We invite speakers we consider to be of high quality from various parts of the world. We have more than 7,500 members and have conducted over 110 events of this kind. We are an open non-profit organization. To stay up to date with the latest developments in Java, we have a podcast series that we release once a month. You can access them on Spotify and iTunes. Every month, we hold JetBrains giveaways. If you would like to participate, you can follow us on Twitter. If you are interested in joining the Java User Group Istanbul or getting more information, we welcome you to our Slack channel. To reach out to us and follow us, you can use our email address hello@jugistanbul.org, our Twitter handle @jug_Istanbul, and other social media links available in the QR code. Thank you for listening to me. Now I will pass the platform to my friend Ömer Naci. Enjoy the presentation.
Yes, Merve. Our webinars will continue. Next week, we will talk about Atom program mentor applications. It will be question-answer formatting, and we will share the details this week. And also, we will have another exciting webinar in October. Mustafa Ilıkkan will talk about unit testing, integration testing, test containers using in Spring Framework. In Atom program, we aim to support open source projects, and first period has come to end 2 months ago. And you can see our statistic for the first period as follows. And we started second period mentor applications. You can see the documentation or calendar on our website. In the first period, I gained new skills as a consultant in Atom program. I will also be mentor for the second period. And I hope you are joining us. You will join us. So that's all, Otavio. The platform is yours. You could start your presentation.
All right. Let me start sharing my screen. I believe my audio and video are okay.
It's
right?
perfect now.
Perfect. Just waiting a little while. I think the presentation has loaded, right? Okay. So welcome everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about Apache Camel. My name is Otavio Rodolfo Piske. I am a principal software engineer at Red Hat, where I work as a committer and a member of the Apache Camel community. You can find me online, mostly on Twitter, but I also live here my GitHub, where you can find me on other social platforms. I live in Brno. I have been here in Czech Republic for about 8 years, but I'm actually from Brazil. Anyway, on the agenda today, I'm going to give you a brief overview about the Apache Camel project. I will talk about the motivations and objectives we had for this major release. I'll explain a little bit about what happened under the hood, what changes we implemented for Camel 4, and I'll finish with some thoughts on the upgrade and some ideas on how you can execute that. The Apache Camel project is actually divided in several sub-projects. The largest and the most known of them is the Camel Core project. The Camel Core project is what actually provides the components and APIs and DSLs that you can use to write your integrations. Then, on top of that, we have a few projects that built on top of Camel Core in order to leverage additional technologies. We have things like Camel Quarkus, which focus on providing the Camel components as extensions to Quarkus. Same thing with Camel Spring Boot. Then we have a few projects which focus on a specific kinds of runtimes or platforms, things like Camel K, with a focus on bringing Camel and Kubernetes or OpenShift together. We have Camel Kafka Connector, which runs Camel within the Kafka Connect runtime. If you have never seen what Camel integration looks like, I'm showing here the example of a Camel route. In this example, we have one route that consumes data from Kafka and sends to a queue on Amazon AWS SQS. Camel has multiple ways in which you can describe this via DSLs, for instance, using YAML or XML. But Java is my preferred one. It's the one that I like most. It's the one that I like using, the most, and it's usually the one that I like showing people. If you haven't followed what happened in terms of new features throughout the life of Camel 3, there were a few features that were introduced during the development of Camel 3, which will only become more prevalent in Camel 4. One of them is Camel JBang. Camel JBang is basically a way to quickly start prototyping and running integrations. Basically, you give it one single file or like one YAML file with the integration you have, and Camel JBang will use it and run that integration. Camel JBang, as I said, is awesome for prototyping. It has features also to simplify bootstrapping new projects. And among other things, Camel JBang also is great for providing functionality for other projects, such as Camel Karavan. Camel Karavan is basically a toolkit for designing routes. You can drag and drop components and patterns and whatnot using Visual Studio codes, and Camel Karavan will save that route you designed as a YAML file for you. And one of the things it can do is it has this nice play button, which you can click, and it runs the route you have designed. So, and it uses Camel JBang to do that. But anyway, this was something we introduced in Camel 3, and I'm here today to talk more about Camel 4. And I think the the best way to start this discussion is to discuss about the motivations for Camel 4. Why have we decided to start a new major version of our framework? Well, the first motivation we had was the new version of the Jakarta APIs, the Jakarta 10. Although Camel itself does not use those APIs internally, many of the libraries we use to implement our components use. And we wanted to be able to upgrade those libraries without the risk of causing any kind of conflicts or version alignment problems for our users. So supporting Jakarta 10 on those libraries and on those dependencies was a big motivation for us. Then we have another important item, which is the Java 17. We know that the community of engineers working on developing Java, developing the language, and the whole ecosystem around the language have been adding more and new awesome features to the language. And we want to make use of that, both for making our code better, but also to implement new features to our users, and also to make use of all the performance improvements you can find on modern Java versions. So supporting Java 17 was another of the big motivations we had. And then we had a set of projects that are very important in the Camel ecosystem. It's either projects and frameworks on which we depend upon or which are used by our sub-projects. And they are the Spring Framework 6, the Spring Boot 3, and the Quarkus 3. It's interesting to note that for these frameworks, for these projects, the other two items was also a motivation for them to work on new major versions of those frameworks. May not be the most important reason for them, but it was certainly one of the motivations as well. And when we look at all these things, it turns out that it was the perfect alignment for us to release a new major version. So, in short, this is a very brief list of the things that we have added to Camel and some of the new things we added. There are many more, but these are a few of those that I personally consider interesting. As I said, Java 17 is now the base version of Java we support for Camel. If you're using the Camel standalone, the Camel main, it now has support for an embedded HTTP server, which can facilitate things like health checks and a health dashboard and so on. We have been working to unify and clean up the XML DSL. This is something that is still kind of in progress, but you can already see the initial bits of that work in Camel 4. And another item that I consider very important is that with Camel 4, we are releasing a software bill of materials. We know that nowadays security is a big topic in all organizations all over the world. They have to have all sorts of rastreability of what they use and release. And with Camel, we are trying to make it easier for all the organizations using our software, and we are packaging and releasing a software bill of materials that those organizations can consume and run all sorts of reports on top of that. With any new version, there's always something that is cleaned up and deprecated, and it was not different in the lifetime of with Camel 4. One of these things is we looked at those items in our projects and in our code that was either a source of many bugs or was showing little usage, and it was causing problems in terms of maintenance for us. One of them was the Camel Karavan, which was a project. It is a project that provides OSGI support for Camel, and we decided to downgrade the support of that to as a best effort. In practice, this means that the releases of Camel Karavan are now decoupled from Camel Core. So we will make releases of that when and if we have time, or when there is someone that volunteers to do the work of fixing bugs, adjusting the code, and releasing it. Then we took another step and looked at our set of components. One thing that happens when you have such a large library of components as Camel does is that every now and then either technologies become superseded by other newer technologies, or they become deprecated, or they stop it being used. And we also look at the libraries we use to implement our components to see in what state they were. In some cases, it also happens that the libraries we rely upon for developing those components, that they become unmaintained, or that they evolve at a different pace. They sometimes may not support Java 17 and won't support Java 17 for a long time. So when we analyzed what was happening in all this ecosystem, we identified 35 components that we could either remove or put into some kind of deprecation notice. And with Camel 4, we removed all these 35 components. So this actually resulted in a smaller code base for us to maintain, and it's a helpful item in a large project as Camel. We also look at, for instance, some things that kind of became deprecated because newer versions of themselves were released. One of that was JUnit. We know that nowadays most of the projects are using JUnit 5, and it has become pretty much the de facto version of JUnit being used. So it made little sense for us to maintain support for JUnit 4. So that was also removed from Camel. Under the hood, Camel 4 brings quite a few new changes. These are most things that won't impact users, but it's always interesting to give this perspective to our community so that they know all the things that are happening in the Camel, in the Camel community, and in what direction the Camel core is moving towards. Starting with the things that users don't usually see, we made an effort to improve the experience, the developer experience for the contributors and for everyone involved in the community. We worked to provide faster builds with Camel. Those of you that may have tried to contribute with Camel in the past may have noticed that building Camel takes a long time. For instance, with Maven Daemon, building Camel 3 on my machine, M2 Pro, usually takes about 6 minutes. With Camel 4, this goes down to about 1 minute and 20 seconds. And with using the regular Maven, it's pretty much on the same line. The reduction is pretty much comparable to that. We also worked to make our build compatible with Apache Maven 4. I think it's not out yet, but we already want to ensure that our code is buildable with that version. Then we looked at our library of tests. Camel has about 22,000 tests. And executing that is kind of time consuming, even for our CI environment. And we looked at what was consuming time to to run and execute. And we did a few optimizations on that, either adjusting timers or parallelizing tests, or simply fixing certain bugs that were causing them to run slowly. We also made an effort to fix flaky tests on our CI. In a library of 20,000 tests, it kind of not uncommon that every now and then something pops up, and then on a few builds later, then it disappears. And that's kind of annoying because it reduces our trustworthiness with the results of our CI. And we did a big effort to fix that and ensure that our build is very reliable. We also did an effort in order to improve building and running Camel tests on certain platforms: Power, Linux on mainframe, and ARM. Of course, Camel runs fine on those platforms, but we wanted the users building things, building Camel or building products on top of Camel on those platforms for them to be to have a nicer experience if they were using Camel on those platforms. And lastly, we also worked on creating a JUnit extension for the Camel context, which is an idea we hope to evolve with time and eventually make it public for the public API, let's say, for our users. It's something that we hope will allow us to clean up further our tests. Then internally, we did the usual, I think, process that many projects do when they have a new major version. We took the opportunity to clean up internal APIs. As we received many contributions from the community, and it's a project that evolves quite quickly, it turns out that every now and then we have to deprecate internal APIs. With Camel 4, we took an opportunity to look at what was those deprecated APIs and remove them and clean up our code in the process. Another item that is, again, not usually something that our users use or interact with is what we call the internal plugin manager. In Camel 3 and before, there were no consistent interface for interacting with those plugins. In Camel 4, we worked on creating a nicer API for interacting with those plugins. This is something that helps projects such as Camel Quarkus, Camel Spring Boot, and so on, projects that actually, plug deep into the core of Camel. And one important topic on the development of Camel 4 was the part related to performance improvements. In particular, we worked around an issue on JDK. Not really an issue, it's more like a behavior of the JDK, which is kind of mapped into this issue 81/8450, which is related to a performance impact that can happen on certain applications when they do type checks. Camel was affected by this issue, and it turns out that this issue can cause quite a great impact on certain kinds of applications like Camel and Hibernate and a few others. If you are interested in learning more about this JDK issue, I strongly recommend looking at the Quarkus runtime, a peek into JVM internals. This was a talk that was presented in Devox UK by 2 engineers from Red Hat. One of them was the guy that kind of popularized the importance of this JDK issue among many projects in the open source community. And they talk about why this issue is important, especially if you are working on a performance-sensitive application, what they did, how it can be fixed, how it can be analyzed. So working around that issue we came up with many optimizations in Camel, especially in two components, SEDA and disruptor. In addition to those components, we also made several optimizations to the core of Camel. In these optimizations in the core of the Camel will actually benefit pretty much all the other components we have. So, and lastly, as part of all this work in terms of optimizing Camel, we also applied a few micro optimizations here and there, things that individually wouldn't make much of a change, but when combined with all the performance work we did, helps us provide an awesome experience for our users. So, talking about the performance improvements, a little bit about the numbers. So what kind of performance improvements we are talking about? When you look at the SEDA components in a scenario with two consumers, one producer, with heterogeneous data types, you can see a performance improvement of about 19%. Of course, this represents our experience with measuring and not necessarily what others will see, but we believe that this will apply to many other scenarios of users using SEDA. On the same line, with 4 consumers, 1 producer, we have identified about 18% faster results with Camel 4 than with Camel 3.18. And this goes on and on in various other scenarios, including for disruptor in additional configurations. All in all, when we look at our library of performance tests, and we have hundreds of those, I noted that when compared with Camel 3.20.4 using the SEDA components, Camel 4 was faster 80% of the time. Using the disruptor components, comparing with Camel 3.18.6, Camel 4 was faster 80.6% of the time. And lastly, the same component, disruptor, comparing with Camel 3.20, it was faster 91.9% of the time. If you want to know a little bit more about the performance improvements, there is a blog post on the Apache Camel blog. It's entitled Hunting Performance Monsters on the Back of a Camel, where I talk a little bit more about the performance improvements, what we did, some of the tooling we use, and also for those of you that might be able to attend the Community Over Code conference in Halifax, Canada, in 1 month from now, I'll be presenting a talk with the same title, where I will go over about the details of performance improvements for Camel, how we measure, what we did, what we noted, and what we learned in the process. I hope that by this time I sold you the idea of Camel 4, and I hope many of you are already eager to upgrade your applications. So what should you expect in terms of upgrading from Camel 3 to Camel 4? First of all, the upgrade process from Camel 3 to 4 should be much simpler. It should be much easier than it was from Camel 2 to Camel 3. No DSL incompatibilities. Camel has a very good track record of maintaining the DSL compatibility throughout the versions. It should not be different this time. How you plan your upgrades also may depend a bit on what kind of Camel version you are using, what distribution of Camel you're using. If you are using a commercial distribution of Camel, do talk to your vendor. They may have plans already for Camel 4 and check with them. If you're on the upstream version, the usual advices for upgrades apply. Save time for testing. Provide feedback. open Jira tickets, reach out to us in the mailing lists, reach out in chats, do let us know if something broke. And share your knowledge, something that you discover was different in Camel 4 than on Camel 3. Write about it, blog posts, write on the mailing list, let us know. All of these help us when the time comes to create a new major version. We learn from the community as well. The upgrades to Camel 4 may depend a little bit on where exactly your application is on that path. Camel 4 was actually branched from Camel 3.20, and as such, the closer your application is to one of the recent versions, LTS versions of Camel, the easier the migration. On the other hand, if your application is using a relatively older LTS version, let's say 3.14 or older, the upgrade might consume a little bit more effort. Not because we broke things in this way, but because of the cost of all these minor changes spread all over the time may require some effort from you and from your teams. On the other hand, if you're still using Camel 2, which is end of life for quite a while, your upgrade path is a little bit more complicated, and there will be a bit more effort. First, because you have to upgrade from Camel 2 to Camel 3, and all the combined changes that happen throughout all these releases from them to Camel 4, it might require some effort. And there were quite significant changes also from Camel 2 to Camel 3. So take that into consideration. But if you're still using Camel 2, please plan your upgrade. This version is unmaintained and it's end of life for quite a while. I'm describing a simple migration of Camel 3 to Camel 4. Before I talk about this, it's important to make one disclaimer. This represents a small application that I have running here on my home, and it's not even close to the level of complexity that you can find on a real business application. But I think it give you an idea of what it takes to upgrade from Camel 3 to Camel 4. Okay, so a bit of background about this application. It's basically an application that I use to consume data from different sources on the internet, Slash.Reddit, Twitter, and so on, to let me know when there are contents about Camel on those platforms. And it notifies me about it. It was originally based on Camel 3.20.6, running on Java 11, and used some of those famous components, Camel SEDA, Camel Twitter, Camel Jackson, Camel RSS, and a few others. And to give you an idea of the simplicity of this application, it uses H2 as the database. So I started the upgrade process first by reading the migration guide. I wanted to refresh the knowledge of all the changes that happened on Camel 4, and I wanted to cross that with my knowledge of the application and see if there were no major blocks or any major feature that was missing. And with that preparation in mind, I started first by adding Java 17 support to the application, and then by updating the Camel version from 3 to 4. Then, once that was done, I could align the runtime dependencies. Camel 4 has a few new dependencies, such as the SLF4J for logging, which might require adjustments on the versions used by your application. And so I had to do that on my own application. There may be case of a few other libraries, but again, this is something that may vary from application to application. And lastly, I worked on the affected code. The first one of them was related to Twitter. It turns out that the version of the Twitter 4J library that comes with Camel 4 migrated some of the package that they use to a different package. So applications using that will have to adjust the packages if they are accessing some of that data. Of course, this only applies to applications using Camel Twitter. Then, my application has a custom component for consuming data from Reddit. I had to adjust a few things on that component because one of the annotations it uses, I think the consumer annotation, it had a few of those members removed because they were deprecated, and I had to adjust my application for that. And lastly, the Camel Swagger Java component was removed. My application made the use of that. It did not provide any important feature in terms of that application, so I simply removed it from our code, and that was all it took for it to be migrated. In terms of using impacting changes, as I said, the logging library was upgraded on Camel 2, on Camel 4, and you might need to adjust that on your application. One of the rarely used exchange patterns, the in optional out, which was deprecated, was removed. I don't think this is widely used at all. It's pretty much, I think, a rare feature, so should not have much impact. For those of you using the standalone Camel with the main and configuring the instance of the main and configuring the Camel instance using the main listener, the method configure was removed. It was one of the deprecated APIs. However, this is easily replaced with the after configure and before configure methods, which are available on the main listener, and they have been available since earlier versions of Camel 3. Users loading routes externally, like XML or YAML routes, they may need to adjust the way they do that because the routes loader is one of the plugins that was moved to the plugin helper. So you might need to adjust that. It's one of the few cases I remember where users might need to use the plugin helper. Now, what's else? What's in the future for Camel? We have released Camel 4 already, but the development of Camel 4 continues, and we have many things still on the plans and things that we want to do. Talking about roadmap, Camel 4.1, we are planning a release in November. Then after that, we are planning a release of Camel 4.2. This is important one because this should be an LTS release of Camel, and it should be out in January next year. We have a few of our sub-projects releasing new versions based on Camel 4. One of them is Camel Kafka Connector. I think there is already a pull request with Camel 4 support, so it should be available soon. Java 21, that should be out in a few days, and we do plan to support that as a secondary version. Java 17 will remain the base version for Camel and the one which provides the set of features we can use from the language, but we do plan to start testing Camel with Java 21 on our CI and on our daily usage as soon as it is out. And lastly, we continue the work on performance optimizations. Camel 4.1 will bring a new type converter, one that works around that JDK issue I mentioned, should provide slightly better performance. And also, we have plans for more improvements to the Camel Kafka component. This is one of the most used components we have, and it already has quite a large backlog of features and ideas and things that we would like to close. So watch out for the changes there, because there should be a few new interesting features. Now I leave this presentation leaving a few of important links for Camel. They are related to the migration guide. So every version that we have, we write the migration guides, and users can consult that to look at what has changed, what can impact their applications. So this is an important reading material for those of you planning to upgrade to Camel 4. And with that, I think it's open for questions and answers if we have any.
Thanks a lot, Otavio. I have 2 questions about the Spring Boot migration and which Spring Boot version compatible to Apache Camel 4?
It should be Spring Boot 3. That's the one we are aligning with in Camel 4.
Okay.
I don't know offhand from the top of my head the specific Spring Boot 3 version, but that should be the one. 3 should be the one.
Okay. Another question. Can we use Camel Karavan Visual Editor in IntelliJ IDEA? Is there any plugin for using this editor?
No, not yet. We don't have plans for that yet.
Is this available only Visual Studio Code?
For the moment, yes.
Okay.
We do have a plugin, a Camel plugin that works on IntelliJ, and we love contributions. So if anyone wants to help us, provide that, I think it would be awesome.
Okay, thank you again.
Any more questions?
Hello, Otavio. Thanks for the presentation. I have one question. First of all, it has been a fantastic effort, the Camel 4, and it has been a big cleanup and upgrade, I think. And it will help with our projects in the future very much. Thanks for all of the upgrades. I just I'm curious about something. Red Hat has a support for Camel under a project named Fuse. So some of our customers using Fuse because they use OpenShift platform, but Fuse project follows very old version of Camel. So sometimes we are having problem with using some newer components, for example. We have to invent our own solutions because of that. You know why they are following very from back? And I think it's a business decision, but I'm just curious about the reason.
So just a disclaimer, because I'm not part of the sales organization, and I cannot speak for Red Hat, but I can share the public information that I have, and it's already available on Red Hat website. Fuse, Red Hat Fuse is already approaching the end of life, which means that future versions of integration-based products from Red Hat will not be using this brand or the same architecture and technologies as Red Hat Fuse. What is the upgrade path for Red Hat Fuse users that want to migrate to the newer versions? It's the Red Hat build of Apache Camel. It's the set of integration technologies that integration products that Red Hat is productizing as part of Camel, and they are based on Camel Quarkus and the Camel Spring Boot projects. So what I strongly recommend for the users of Fuse and the customers of Red Hat is to reach out to our to their teams and their contacts within Red Hat to discuss about the upgrade path for their applications.
Thank you for the explanation. That was clear.
Welcome.
Thank you again, Otavio. Maybe we can finish our session.
All right. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to present to you. It was awesome to be here and talk about Camel with all of you.
Thank you for sharing your time. Take care.